That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Frank and Penelope, the directorial debut of Sean Patrick Flanery, which is being released courtesy of Redbud Studios, their first film that they're distributing across 100 theaters in June 3rd, 2022.
If you're affiliated with this movie, do not watch this review. If you are going to be upset if someone doesn't like it, turn this shit off.
This will probably be the worst film I've seen in 2022. It is terrible in ways that are not entertaining.
And I don't like not enjoying watching a movie. And this was so hard to sit through. At the 15-minute point, I was like, turn it off. And then I had a change of heart because I thought we already wasted 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Let's just finish it. And then we can make a video. And at least that will bring me joy. But yeah, this was, I don't even know where to begin. And it has the nerve to be like kind of complex in the story, like overly complex.
Yes, it has tangents and layers which add to the nonsensical circus that it is. And on paper, there's a lot of homage going on. It's a very derivative film, but there are a lot of reference points that would suggest a really interesting story in there.
Because when I read the plot synopsis, I was interested. And talk about some of the
execution is terrible. First of all, Sean Patrick Flanery.
How do I know him?
A notable actor from his youth. Powder was a big film directed by Victor Salva in the mid-90s.
Oh, I'm familiar with Powder.
Okay, same.
But not him.
Okay, yeah, well, he's Powder. And then...
Wait. Sean Patrick Flanery was Powder?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, he was a kid then. That was like 1995.
The bald pale man is him?
Yeah.
No, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I haven't seen that film in like 15 years, but I'm pretty sure.
Whoa. I remember liking Powder.
You also...
thinking he was cute.
The Boondock Saints, which I don't think is a good movie, but if you are a Willem Dafoe fan, it is certainly worth seeing for Willem Dafoe. But yeah, he's got a lot of film credits. A lot of them over the past 2 decades haven't been that good.
And then I saw Lin Shaye is in it, and yes. I do enjoy her.
Yes, and I did... as a child, I kind of had a thing for Johnathon Schaech.
He's very handsome.
Who I'd seen in That Thing You Do, and then remember renting on VHS Invasion of Privacy, co-starring Naomi Campbell, as well as Hush, co-starring Jessica Lange and Goop. So yeah.
I think Naomi Campbell's birthday was yesterday, so shout out to her.
So reading the press notes also, you can see what they were kind of aiming for. So the original story was by John Thaddeus, and it was optioned by the producers. And the original is more of a horror story because it's about an actual family in West Virginia called the Bloody Benders who would kidnap people and eat them. But then Sean Patrick Flanery wanted to create this template of kind of a romance road film that he says was influenced by the Steve Miller Band's Take the Money and Run. Again, those all sound like interesting things, and in retrospect, this is a complete mess of a hodgepodge of a film. But there's that element there of kind of like Tony Scott's True Romance, or even Bonnie and Clyde mixed with Hills Have Eyes, and
Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
The Last Supper, but what this should have felt like is David Lynch's Wild at Heart, considering all of those elements combined with Nick Cage and...
Okay, we need to tell the story. Frank and Penelope. So we meet Frank. He's driving home in his Prius, and he's calling his lady, excited to see her. He wants to celebrate.
His wife.
That is his wife? Mm-hmm. Okay. So we hear him calling his wife, leaving a voicemail. He's excited to celebrate. I think it's like a job-related thing. And when he gets home, he finds his wife having sex with another man, like, in the front window of the house. And they live in... I believe it's Austin, Texas, in a very nice residential area, like populated residential area. In plain sight of anyone walking by, she's getting railed in the front window.
And being very loud and speaking in a way where he's saying, he doesn't do this to you this good or something. It reminded me of, remember Luke Wilson and Juliette Lewis in Old School? Where he goes home and some man shows up and he's like, I'm here for the gangbang.
Oh. It could be funny, but it's not in this movie. So he witnesses that. Of course, he's devastated and drives away. So he's at a liquor store, and there's a strip club next door called like Gator.
The Gator Club.
The Gator Club.
But it's an acronym for something really ridiculous, like the girls.
Anyway, there's a young lady sitting outside who turns out to be Penelope, and she sort of seduces him to come inside. And she's dressed kind of like plain Jane, and then we cut to her in the strip club, and she's like done up. Mm-hmm. And her sort of a game is that she sort of like seduces these men, steals their credit card, and then gives the credit card to her boss, played by the director. Mm-hmm. They charge the shit up, and then they split it, 80-20.
Like Hustlers.
Yeah, kind of like Hustlers. But in this instance, so she's talking to him like, yeah, baby, let's go away somewhere. I want to be with you. And this fool is like, okay. So she steals his credit card, goes in the back, and tells her boss, run it for 1,000 and give me 50%. And he's like, bitch, you're getting the 20 you always get. And then proceeds to try to whoop her ass. So they're fighting when Frank decides that he wants to save her. So he busts down the door like the Kool-Aid man. And he does that twice in this movie.
A couple times, yeah.
That's the only funny part. He starts fighting with the boss, and they escape together. So Frank and Penelope are now on the run. They stole money from this man. They stole his computer, and they're on the run. Okay. They make their way to a little town called Quicksilver. And we're told at one point, because what's his name, Kevin Dillon?
The sheriff, played by Kevin Dillon.
He plays a sheriff who pulls them over at a point before they get to Quicksilver, saying like, where are you headed, blah, 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 flirting with Penelope. And he's like, listen, the next 60 miles, don't even stop. There's one town called Quicksilver, do not go there. And if you do, just get gas and keep it pushing. But of course, these fools go to Quicksilver and spend the night. Concurrently, Kevin Dillon's daughter has run away or something.
No, she just has a flat, I think.
No, but because she calls him and says I know I've been gone for a few days or whatever.
It's unclear.
The sheriff's daughter is driving out of town and gets a flat tire. And one of these the story is about a bunch of cannibals who occupy this little town of Quicksilver.
That are led by a cult figure played by Jonathan Schaech.
But the cult only has 5 members.
Yeah.
So one of them is this redhead guy.
Cleve, played by Brian Maillard.
Who is in his tow truck, pulls up to the sheriff's daughter, and sort of games her and says, oh, I got to tow your car back, and you have to spend the night. Because we're going to eat you, girl. So he does that. Okay. This little cult that's run by
Schaech.
He gives backstory on his grandfather used to work in the mercury mines in Quicksilver. And this mine had a work release program for prisoners, felons. And one day the mine collapsed with his grandfather in it and these felons. And the grandfather was stuck in that mine for 11 days. For 11 days. And he says in order to stay alive, his grandfather had to eat the felons.
Like all of them?
In 11 days?
I mean, you could subsist on a leg.
It would take more than 11 days for me to eat someone, but whatever, he did. And then there's this religious component to it where he says that they're basically doing God's work by eating bad people. So
sin eaters.
This family, this cult has sort of kept that tradition going. So they cannibalize bad people. Lin Shaye comes in because she's a guest of the hotel in Quicksilver. And it's established that she's a shitty mom or something. So they eat her ass. Then Frank and Penelope show up. And I'm so confused by what the ringleader, Jonathan Schaech, thought he was going to do with them. Because is it Schaech, Jonathan or Joshua?
Jonathan Schaech.
He seems to have eyes for Penelope and tells her he wants to have a baby with her. Mm-hmm. But then she's a bad person, so it's shouldn't they be eating her? But whatever.
That's a contentious point amongst the clan. Mm-hmm.
Just to wrap the shit up, Frank and Penelope, they're being held captive. They do end up escaping. In the process, a couple of people die, including Jonathan Schaech. They make their way back to Frank's house because he has to grab something. And the thing he wants to grab is the wedding ring he tried to give his wife, but she didn't want it because it was too cheap. And he gives it to Penelope. So we would assume they're going to get married. And then the final gag is those two drive off into the sunset, but the director, her old boss, he's not dead. They just whooped his ass. So we see him like following them. So maybe part 2 they'll have to fight him.
God, I hope that never comes to fruition.
Oh my God. It's just so uninteresting. The acting's terrible. Penelope is probably the worst. Can we talk about her?
Caylee Cowan.
She's beautiful. I thought she looked like Shakira.
Sure. She's doing this boozy Anna Nicole.
Jennifer. If you mix Jennifer Coolidge and Anna Nicole Smith and then lobotomize that person, that's how she was talking.
Oh, she's doing this affect and then running through this really verbose dialogue that is like you can't even understand what she's saying sometimes.
I would say like 40% of what she said was unintelligible.
It is difficult to sit through.
And her affect, there's a range. Sometimes it's real thick and sometimes it's real light.
She's trying to be sexy, but she's also she's definitely dead behind the eyes. She reminded me of the this actress named Poppy Montgomery who played Marilyn Monroe in a early 2000s miniseries about the tragic actress. In a way that I didn't like, clearly. But and then as Frank, Billy Budinich is making his film debut. Wow, they are both. It's there are too many things to pinpoint who's to blame, but the direction and the screenplay and the acting are all a trifecta of shit.
The story's too complicated. Like
it's but again, there is a way to have told the story with these reference points. Again, but the familiarity, the homage is so familiar. It is straight up derivative. And it doesn't even. It's not even just Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's any number of films, drive-through films.
Thelma and Louise,
which it directly references that you could pick from the '70s that he's referencing, like Poor Pretty Eddy, where poor Leslie Uggams is abused by Shelley Winters out in the backwoods. Like it's just.
Oh, I'd watch that.
It's trash, but it's interesting.
I'm not editing a 30-minute video for this movie, so let me get through my notes. So. Penelope keeps telling Frank, if a man doesn't fly into a rage, he isn't in love. So the film sort of culminates with Frank going into a rage because when he shows up at his house at the end to get the ring, his wife is there. And somehow the man she was cheating on Frank with shows up too. And this man is like antagonizing Frank and threatens him, and Frank whoops his ass. And then you see in Penelope's face, like, oh, he does love me. It's just...
Does Rage the zombie virus count?
Oh!
That is such a dumb scene because they pull up and she's like, don't leave me. He's leaving in the car outside of his house.
Of his house? He's not going anywhere, girl. Okay. The cinematography is really strange because
it's not bad.
It's not bad, but there are some really weird shots that are just like, let's just do this at an angle. Like,
yeah, it's like, oh, we need a really odd aerial shot right now. Or
well, there is one really cool shot towards the beginning when Frank and Penelope first hit the road. They're in his Prius, which we need to talk about. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they have to switch out the car because they're on the run. So they get this cool, like, classic muscle car. And they're driving... And Frank gets like really aroused by Penelope. So he's like, I have to pull over and like have sex with you. So they drive into like, they pull off the road towards a lake. And I think that shot was really cool. Okay, but I need to talk about Frank. Because I feel like the casting is so odd. Well, I'm not going to say the casting. I think the styling of this character is off because he should have been made to seem really square. Mm-hmm. So maybe have like a slick comb over with thick rimmed glasses and like a tucked in shirt.
Like there's a transformation.
And then there's a transformation to him sort of being like a James Dean type character. Because his character does have like, I mean, they're trying to give him a pompadour, but his hair density doesn't really allow for that. And then he's a nice enough looking gentleman. I think there need to be more of a transformation of him sort of leaving behind his old life to start this new life, and then his look changes. But from the jump, like he just doesn't fit the mold of how his wife treated him, the kind of house he lives in. He's driving a damn white Prius. It just doesn't fit.
It was white?
What, it wasn't?
I don't think it was white.
Whatever, it's a Prius.
But he reminded me of times of like a young Tony Curtis, where it's like, oh, he's really handsome, and then sometimes it's like, lighting, I guess. But
when the sheriff's daughter, probably the only scene that I think had a correct tone, but then getting back to cinematography, even with this scene, everything's so bright.
Yeah,
which can work because like The Hills Have Eyes, it's very well lit, but it's just. Everything is so damn bright, including the strip club. But a scene that did kind of work well for me is when the sheriff's daughter calls a tow truck because she has a flat tire. The redhead guy shows up, and he looks scary because all his teeth are rotten except for one.
It looks like hummus is dried on his teeth,
or like he was eating like kale and it got caught all. And the girl says like, "I'm scared of you," and doesn't want to open the door, and then he goes into her she finally says, fine, change my spare. He goes in the trunk and we see she has a spare tire, but he tells her, you don't, so I have to tow you into town, which is creepy. And then she gets in the car and he has his truck situated so that she can't sit on the passenger side. She has to sit in the middle next to him, and he's driving like an old truck that's a manual transmission, so the gear shift is like very long and like touching the seat. So it's like in her crotch, and he's driving with like his arm in her crotch. I thought that did work well and was kind of creepy. Then they get to Quicksilver, and that's when it's clear that like things are going to go well for her. Okay, the redhead, his wife,
played by Mabel, played by Donna Derrico.
Okay, first of all, the redhead looks like maybe he's in his early 30s, and then he's saying my wife works here. She's like the bartender, and then we meet her. I'm not trying to be shady, but this lady looks like...
They must have eaten the plastic surgeon in Quicksilver because somebody altered her face.
I don't know how old she's supposed to be, but I mean, it just seems like...
She was also super distracting.
Her face is like frozen and filled, and her lips and like...
And also it has really terrible dialogue. Like, clearly she hates Penelope from the get-go, and she says something like, there ain't no harvest between a whore's legs.
Oh my God.
And then, so Johnathon Schaech, who's playing this cult leader that's like a knockoff of the baddie in Stephen King's The Stand, and he's trying to convince her, Penelope, to bear his child, and she doesn't want to put out, if you will. And he says, either sex is meaningless or rape is bad. It can't be both.
I'll have to think about that.
Okay.
Johnathon Schaech, that character reminded me of the red-haired guy on Strangers with Candy who has the cult.
Yeah.
She can't leave.
Alan, what's his face? Yeah. Tudyk.
Yes.
Father.
Except Johnathon Schaech has like bleach blonde hair.
That doesn't fit him well.
I mean, he's still handsome, but I don't know why his character had to have that awful hair. Then the redhead, his teeth look terrible in the beginning. And then as the film goes on, the amount of like whatever they were using to make his teeth look bad
detritus
is it's not consistent. So at one point I'm like, oh, he went to the dentist because his teeth look cleaner. That was very distracting to me. Okay. So the sheriff's daughter is all scared in her hotel room. It also reminded me of that movie Vacancy with Luke Wilson.
Another Luke Wilson reference.
Yeah. She's in her room, and there's another character, this sort of heavyset guy. What's his name? Ricky or?
Cookie.
Cookie's casting... This cult of cannibals, they don't look right. Johnathon Schaech is handsome minus the hair. The redhead is a good-looking guy minus the weird teeth. The lady with the plastic surgery looks crazy. Then there's Cookie. Cookie's like a handsome guy. Like he doesn't look like he would be chopping body parts. And then his wife looks like the pinhead lady from American Horror Story.
Oh my. Magda, I think her name was, and it's explained that she can't speak because he's crushed her windpipe. Yet she's insistently placed in the background of every scene and cowering and shaking and crying
like a little chihuahua.
Like a chihuahua.
Which was kind of amusing because that poor actor, she was going hard.
But it looked like an SNL skit.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And then Penelope's trying to seduce Cookie because she's locked up at one point. And Magda is back there like cowering, and he's like, get in the corner. This shouldn't be something a wife sees.
A wife should see her husband cheating on her. But anyway, Cookie at one point, I think it's Lin Shaye's character, he chops her leg off. And he's just walking across the parking lot of the hotel with his leg in his hand. And the sheriff's daughter sees it through her hotel room.
And then doesn't leave.
Doesn't leave, doesn't try to call the police. Oh my God.
We are totally forgetting a tangent that we have to hit on.
What is that?
Involving Sonya Eddy. It plays this nurse who's also a medium.
Oh, that is a huge plot point. Okay, the narrative is sort of bookended with this, or it's sort of structured around this nurse, this black lady,
Who's
sitting in the hospital room, and there's someone clearly in the bed, and she's reading their journal to him. And we don't know who she's reading the journal to initially, but it's the journal entry that's telling the story we're watching. So early on, like within the first 20 minutes, we see that Frank is writing in his journal. He's writing in his journal
while he's driving.
After they've left the strip club.
Frenetically writing.
On the steering wheel driving. Okay, so as the audience, we're like, oh, so Frank is incapacitated in this hospital bed. But it's not Frank. We learned in the very end that the redhead guy ends up killing himself, or attempting to kill himself.
Yeah,
because he finds out that his wife, the plastic surgery lady, is having an affair with Johnathon Schaech. So he wants his life to be over. And he sacrifices his life to help Frank get out of a pit, which we can get into.
We're going to get into the pit?
Well, let's get into the pit right now. So, again, this cult's motivation is so confusing to me because Johnathon Schaech it's like he's going to let Frank live, but Frank has to sort of join the cult. And to do so, Frank has to eat one of the bodies that's in this pit he's been thrown into.
And the only one worth eating is the one that's turned into jerky, because the rest of them is how I would approach that if it were me.
So
he's basically, for a large portion of the film, running around in this pit screaming Penelope.
So I don't understand why...
But there's also a blue barrel of water in there that he could try to stand on.
Oh my God.
It's fine.
Anyway, Frank is in this pit, and he's trying to get out. The cult leader says, you can eat someone, and if you do, I'll let you out and you're part of our group. But before that happens, or before he, I guess, has to eat someone, the redhead comes and says, you're a good guy, I read your journal, I'm not going to kill you, I think you deserve a second chance. He hangs himself in the pit, and Frank uses him to climb out. Okay. That man hung himself and looked like he was dead, fell into the pit, left for dead. How did he end up in the hospital?
We don't know. I guess
that makes no sense. And then why, as the audience, what is the gag supposed to be? Who cares?
Right. And this poor nurse, clairvoyant,
and then that poor lady,
medium.
And then the nurse who's reading the journal, we're also told, one of the other nurses says, aren't you a clairvoyant? And she's like, no, I'm a medium. And if the spirit moves me, I'll touch him and see what he has to say. So in the very end...
But it's is that what you're hired to do? Because she's literally in scrubs sitting there reading.
It makes no sense.
Ostensibly what would be hours.
It makes no sense. I don't know what it adds to the story. And then in the very end, when the person in the bed dies, and we learn that it's the redhead, she touches him, and then she gets a reading, and then she starts talking, looking out of the window. But what she's saying doesn't make any sense. So I don't know what it added to the story. And also, I don't know why they added this component of the journal, because then all that does is force us to have to learn about the journal.
But then there are a doctor and other nurses that come try to revive him, and she's sitting there touching his leg, and I believe that's presented in kind of the slow motion, dreamy kind of.
At a point, the cannibals are rummaging through Penelope's stuff, and she has a certificate of sex work.
All the fine young cannibals. Yeah, again, there are so many weird things that, because this is a mess, it makes it seem just stupid. But I could see somebody that knows how to tell a story, a writer, perhaps not an actor, taking this and making it something kind of innovative and interesting, but...
So I did think the actress playing Penelope was beautiful. Her hair is awful. It's like this high lift yellow blonde. And then she always has it like curled, but it's curled like forward. It just looks like...
I'm sorry, that performance was completely unforgivable, and her SAG card should be taken away.
Oh.
Like, I would avoid watching something for
because
her.
she's in it?
Because it is such a bad performance. Like, oh
they water her down at one point, like to cleanse her, but all they do is take a water hose and like douse her head. And then, you know, when hair's over processed, when you get it wet, it turns gummy. I thought that was funny because her hair looked so gummy when it was wet. Oh gosh. The cannibal people, because it's set in like modern time because he's driving a Prius. We see a smartphone, but then the cannibal people are all using like cell phones from the late 80s. Like, how are they charging these? And can you even get data on those? I don't know what they were doing. Oh, okay. So when Frank and Penelope leave the hotel, like they've escaped, they're driving down the highway, and there's sort of like a supernatural component that's not well explained, and it...
like most things in this
But
film.
the cult leader apparently has like some sort of powers.
He likes to go to this dance move in the middle of the road.
It's very Doctor Strange. Like he does this thing and then it like stops. So Frank and Penelope are driving down the highway doing 100 miles an hour, and then Johnathon Schaech pops into the highway at a distance and does his little dance, and the car stops. But the way it's done, it seems like they chose to stop the car. Like they didn't want to hit him.
It seems like something has happened in their love for one another and their connection that there's some kind of mystical thing happening with objects in the car that are...
It was so stupid because in the car, like they stopped the car, turned the car off, then they were like, no, let's go. They try to turn the car back on, it won't start. And then they start doing all the shit you just said. They get the car started and they drive towards the cult leader, and they hit him. And that was comical, like the effect of them hitting him. Because he flies up, but then he lands in front of the car, which makes no sense. He's not dead, and he's holding on to the car. And then he ends up falling underneath. They run his ass over in this hot-ass desert highway.
And then the
he doesn't die.
The sheriff's daughter, who has been shot in the middle of the desert, apparently
somehow pops up.
is nearby, blood dried on her face, and has a gun, and then
she shoots him up
a whole bunch of times.
Oh, and she pees on him.
That's right.
What?
Again, it's just because, again, it's just throwing a bunch of weird, odd details doesn't make something good either. It's like there has to be, what is the scope? What is the point? Is there a message?
Okay, for a movie about cannibals, we don't really see them eating. We don't see them eating anything except at one point we see Cookie eating what looks like KFC. So it's not particularly gory. We do see gunshots, but the effects aren't the best. So it just looks like, you know, CGI blood splattering, but it's not gory enough. This man runs away with a stripper. You would think it'd be hot and heavy with sex stuff. No, and even there is a scene where she asks Frank to have sex with her, and that was so unsexy. So not gory, not sexy, not scary, not funny. I don't know what there. If I paid my little $17 and drove my new car and put miles on it and had to find parking and sat through this shit, I would be so upset. And if I streamed it and paid my little $7.99, I would be so upset.
Well, even what it's doing with the title, it's evoking another lineage and tradition of films like Frankie and Johnny, or there's, I know nobody really knows or references this movie, but there's a Michael Shannon Imogene Poots film from a few years ago called Frank and Lola. It's like you also it signifies that there are two Bonnie and Clyde. There are two very strong central characters who we're going to be invested in.
Right, but then this story is not really focusing on them. There's too much happening that it's like, okay. I can't believe the video got cut off because we've gone so long for a movie that I dislike so much. I'm probably not going to try to edit it properly. Well, I'm so frustrated with this movie. What would you give it?
I would give it... Again, I've said this before for terrible films, that I don't believe in zeros, but the lowest possible, which would be like a 0.5. It is...
Yeah, I would give it 0.5.
But remember... there ain't no harvest between a whore's legs. That's gonna stay with me.
Do you have anything else?
No.
I think we deserve money for this video, for sitting through this stupid movie, so hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.